Welcome back to another video. My name is Ronak Vyas and this video is a collaboration with Programming Knowledge. In the previous video, we talked about how the Spring MVC framework works, and we also talked about how we can create a to-do entity in Spring. In this video, we'll talk about how we implement a GET API, and we'll actually start implementing our REST API. The first API which we're going to actually target is the GET API. So before we jump on to the implementation, let's first talk about how we'll be doing it. So for a few videos for the API endpoints, we will not be adding a database yet. We will only be having our database in memory with just objects, and later in the future, once we are done with how the controller works or how the business service works, after that we can then talk about how we can integrate a database, a MySQL database, into our application. So until then, we'll be having an in-memory database to work with, which will actually mimic how our actual database takes place. So until that, we'll just focus on the controller and the service or the business logic, which we'll be creating for our to-do list application. So in the previous video, this is where we were. We had our to-do entity and we had constructed the getters and setters and the constructor for it. In this video, we'll actually go ahead and actually start making our to-do list API. So now again, we need a new class for a controller. So go to the package and click class. This is going to be to-do controller. Finish. Great. And now here we need to have two methods. So the controller is basically what talks to your request URL. So if you have a todolist.com slash get all to-dos, so that actually, or the slash to-dos, that actually gives you all the to-do list tasks. So the controller takes care of that, and we'll see how that works. So let's create our method. So we have a public list of to-do, and this is going to be get all to-dos. Great. So let's import the necessary functions. So here we have the list from util, and we return the list of to-dos whenever you ask this. Now, how do we actually map this to the URL? So as we saw in our the second video, right, how to implement a REST controller here. So we have to give it a REST controller annotation and also the request mapping annotation. So let's do that now. So to make this a REST controller, we have to give it a REST controller annotation, and we again import it. And to map the request with this method to slash to-dos, we need to do a request mapping, and the mapping will be done to slash to-dos. Oh, my bad. Yeah. And let's import request mapping as well. Okay, great. So now we have a method called get all to-dos, and which is mapped to slash to-dos, but we need to return a list of to-dos now. So how do we do that? So the one way could be to actually implement a logic right inside here. So we can just write the logic here and then return that right now. But things are a bit different here. So this is a controller class, so it only deals with the controller and not the business logic or the service, also called a service or logic. So the controller only takes care about how the logic or how the data is actually sent back to the view, right, which is the JSON. So we will actually have a service which actually deals with the business logic of getting all the tasks, etc., etc. So let's implement our service class, which is the to-do service. So go again, let's close this and go to to-do, new class, and we call it to-do service, and let's create it. So this class will contain all the business logic which we have to actually give back the controller some data. So here first we need a list of to-dos, right? So we'll have a private list to do called as to do's, and this is going to be an array list. So new array list, and let's actually implement our array list, right? So this is going to be arrays dot as list, and let's have a few lists here. So the first thing which we have is a new object, so a new to do, and the ID is going to be 1, the name is going to be task 1, summary is going to be summary 1, and description is going to be description 1. Yes, so let's just make a few more so that we got enough to work with. We'll call this 2 and 3, and let's import our list. Great. So now how do we actually let Spring know that this is a service? So how do we let Spring know that? Similarly, how when we talk about this being a REST controller, we need Spring to know that this is a service, so that Spring can do a class path scan and then understand that this is a service, and all services are singleton. So Spring only creates one object of this service, and then it keeps using it so that it saves time and space. So to do that, we just have a service annotation, and this lets Spring know that this is a service. Great. Now we have a to-dos list of to-do. So it has 3 tasks: task 1, task 2, and task 3. So let me just fix that right now. Task 2 and task 3. Now let's do it for this one as well. So it's going to be 2 and 3. Great. So great. Now let's actually implement our method or the business logic. So how we do that is we do a public list to do get all to do's, and we return to do's. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And now we have the logic here for get all to do's, which just returns all the to do list objects. And now we need a way for this to be injected into our controller. So let's see how this works. So we do a private to do service. We create or instantiate a class variable to do service, and to inject all of this inside our controller, we have an auto-wired annotation. So we'll talk about what auto-wired is and what dependency injections are. So basically, the service is dependent on the controller is dependent on the service, and we want to use that service inside our controller. So we talk about how we use dependent injection in a later video, but let's see how this works now. So now that we have our to do service, all we have to do is do to do service dot to do service dot get all to do's, and we're good to go. So this is how we actually get all the to do's, and let's run this and see how this works. So we are inside to do list. So cancel, go down to do list. Okay, let's see how this works. Just run. Could not find to do list dot to do list. Okay, it's right here. Run as Java application. Great. Yeah. So let's wait for the server to be spinning up, and then we can actually test this to see if it works. So as you can see here, we have our to-do list ready. So let's go to our browser. So let's go here and let's go to port 8080 and let's see slash to-dos. So here, as you can see, we have our task 1, task 2 and task 3. So I named it wrong, but yeah. So we have our 3 tasks here, and this was with the help of the method here. So if I close this and cut it out, so here we had a slash to dos and we had a to do service. So let me quickly fix this. So we have 2 2 2 and 3 3 3, and this is going to be 2, and this is going to be 3. Great. So this is how we actually implement a get API, and now let's actually have a get API for getting it by ID or just getting one to-do list. Or so we do again a request mapping, and now we don't want only the to-dos, we just want one to-do, right? So we just want the ID, but the ID here is a variable, right? It's a class variable called as ID. So to actually have variables inside your URL, we use curly braces and we put our variable name inside that. So now whenever you have an ID 1, ID 2, ID 3, it will be mapped as slash to do slash 1 slash to do slash 3. Okay, so we do a public to do get to do, and this will have the integer ID. Now we need we need to tell Spring Boot that this ID is the same as this one inside our URL. So for this we have an annotation called as path variable. So path variable basically tells Spring Boot that this one, the ID here, is going to be mapped to the ID in the URL, and all we have to do is do a return to do service dot get to do and pass in the ID. So we haven't implemented get to do yet, so let's do that right now. So we create a method here. Great. And all you have to do is return to dos dot convert it to a stream, and then we filter the stream. So the filter is going to be a lambda expression. So for every to do, every task, we have to get the ID and check it if it's equal to the ID which we pass, and if it is, then we do a find first. So we find the first one and we do a dot get to it. Oh, sorry, do a find first and dot get. Yeah. So let's see what the error is here. Types mismatch for a stream. Oh, okay. So we need to do start filter. Okay. Oh, my bad. Yeah. Okay. So stream dot filter equals ID dot find first dot get, and yeah. Great. So here what we're doing is we are filtering all the to-dos, getting each of them by ID, then we compare it with the ID here and get the first one which we find. So how does the workflow look like? So we have the to-do slash ID, we have the integer which is passed into to-do.service, and we get the ID, we go to the service and we filter it by the ID and check if the ID matches anything inside here, and we get it back. So this is how we get one single to do using the ID. So let's run it again and see how this works. So run as Java application. Up in no time. So yep, so we have our server ready. So all you have to do is do /1 and we get the first to do now. So as you can see, we had the first to do. We go to 2, we have the second one, and when we go to 3, we have the third one. And if we go to just /todos, we have all of them here, as you can see. So this is how a get API works inside Spring Boot. And in the next video, we'll talk about how we can implement a post API. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.